Can you hear me okay there, Terry, do you know, or can you figure that out? Okay. This is a great new tube that we've just developed with Canyon Plastics. About a year ago, Jay Pennington of Canyon Plastics and I were trying to figure out a way for us to have a little bit of a larger tube to go after lake trout specifically. And heretofore, we've had people take the Tora tube, which has been a phenomenal seller for Canyon Plastics, and actually try to glue them together to get a 12, a 14-incher. And quite frankly, that was a little bit unwieldy for us. So Jay and I worked together on this to come up with an 8 and a 10-inch version of the Tora tube, which we now call the Giant Gitzit, which is a great bait for specifically lake trout, and the applications haven't even begun to be thought of for northerns, for muskie, for even saltwater species. All of these will do this. So what I want to do is I want to show you and just point out how this bait works in the water and what it looks like and what it does. Okay, the first thing that you notice is that bait has some air in it. So when that bait has air in it, it's going to take that air bubble down to the bottom. It's going to take it with it, so it's expending a little bit of air as it goes down. Then, if I want to just swim it, this bait swims so naturally. And look, I don't have anything in the middle of it. I've just got a nice little half-ounce, three-quarter-ounce weight there. And look at how natural that looks in the water. Okay, now the interesting thing is, I never thought that this would be like a swim bait. But you know, about a month ago, or within the last month, it's not been, quite frankly, a complete month, I was up at Flaming Gorge, Utah, which is my home water, my home lake, and I got back into the back of a cove and I realized that I had some lake trout running around, so I started to swim this bait back to me, very similar to what I'm doing here. And a 23-pound lake trout came up and inhaled it completely from the back of the bait, took the whole bait in its mouth, and that was it as a swim bait bite. That changed my world. It rocked my world because of the fact that I was thinking that all the fish were going to do is hit the head. Hit the head, hit the head. But if you're swimming it, they can come right up from the bottom, from the back, and take that whole thing in. I killed, because we're trying to get rid of some, there's a lot of 8 to 12 pound lake trout in Flaming Gorge. They'd like you to take a few home and eat them. So I killed a 12-pound lake trout last year, and when I gutted the fish, I realized that there were 3 10-inch kokanee in that fish, and I'm thinking, this is incredible. So why aren't we building a 10-inch Gitzit to go catch those? Well, that's what Jay and I've done, and that's exactly what Canyon Plastics is doing, and it's a phenomenal bait. Okay, so I'll do it once again. You have that little air pocket there. As the air pocket filters out, it's going to go down to the bottom. Okay? And then you can start to do whatever you want to it. You can yo-yo it. You can swim it back to you. Now that's if the lake trout are shallow, if they're chasing. Okay, but if you like I like to jig for lake trout, especially in the summertime, they'll get down to between 80 and 100 feet deep. I come over the top of them, find them on my fish finder, and then I drop the bait all the way down. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people think that jigging for lake trout is something that you just do like this, like you might be jigging for halibut or you might be jigging for some other fish and have this big movement. That is not what's necessary here. What I find is that if you go all the way to the bottom, and then if you lift that off the bottom just a little bit, and the natural movement of the boat is going to give all the action that you need. Notice, I'm not even having to do anything to my rod tip. Nothing to my rod tip at all. Okay, and just the movement of the boat, wave action, whatever. As long as that bait's just a little tiny ways off the bottom, I'm talking within 2 to 3 inches of the bottom. Look at that natural action that gets in there. And so what we call it is, the method we call it is just dead sticking. We're not jigging this up and down. It's not like a drop shot where you like to have the weight on the bottom and then the lure comes off about 18 or so, or even 6 or 8 inches above that, and then you have to start and you have to jiggle the rod tip so that the weight doesn't come off the bottom but the actual bait has action. That's not needed here. As long as you can see on your finder, which is what I do when I'm jigging, and I can actually see my bait on my finder, and so I can just bring it up off the bottom just enough so that I've got the weight off of it, and then just the normal movement of the boat, the normal movement of the waves gives that all the action in the world it needs. And the fish will come to you. That's the exciting thing about this. The fish will come to the angler. Now the cool thing about developing a bait like this is that we haven't even explored the various applications for this. Just to give you a quick story, back in 2004, I was with Gary Klein at the Bassmaster Classic in Charlotte, and he was with me, and he says, "Don," he says, "I've got a bait for you." He says, "I can't let you show anybody." He says, "But it's a great bait." And he pulled out of his bag of tricks a spreader rig that had like, the only thing I could tell you is it looked like a school of white shad. And he was throwing this thing out, and it was actually just a combination of several Gitzits and other kinds of things that he was throwing out. Well, it was a real cool idea, and I really liked it. But you know what? I'm telling you right now, if you think that this Gitzit is too big to be used on bass, then you haven't seen Byron Velvick catch his fish on Clear Lake in the last couple of months and win that tournament on a hitch that was this size. Not only that, you've got Amistad, you've got Okeechobee, you've got Toho now producing 35 to 40 pound limits of bass. These guys haven't even begun to think about what this would do as a swim bait. And so the applications are just absolutely starting. It's in its infancy. There's that little water or that air pocket there. Now it comes down. I can swim it back to me as a swim bait, or I can jig it. Look at that. Look at those tails. Look what that does. And you know what? Those fish, if they hit the head, fantastic. We're right there with our hook. If they hit the tail, they're going to come up and take the whole thing in. That's what my experience has been. They come up and they want to take it all in one bite. Bass, lake trout, any species that I've ever been associated with, saltwater or fresh, want to expend the least amount of energy to go get whatever they're going to eat eaten. So what that means is that there's not going to be a bunch of bass that are, for example, just going to hit that bait in the tail and not come back and hit that thing in the head. And then what I found with my lake trout, the 23-pounder that came up, he enveloped that whole bait from the back. Every aspect of that bait was in that fish's mouth, and he did it 5 yards off the boat. I was able to watch every single thing that lake trout did. So we're just, at this point, we're just starting our marketing with this particular bait. It comes in a bunch of great colors. The beautiful thing about Canyon Plastics is they have such an array of colors that that this is going to be an awesome opportunity for people to learn how to fish now a large Gitzit, much like they're fishing the swim baits that they have now. And you're going to hear and start seeing people have marvelous success now using a large Gitzit as a swim bait as well as a jigging bait for lake trout, for muskie, for northerns, and in a saltwater application for halibut and other species that right now normally people are jigging for in Alaska and certainly the saltwater species off the coast. So this is an exciting time for us. We're absolutely thrilled to be presenting it at ICAST.